A brand new series is launched at Circuit Paul Ricard this weekend, the GT3 Revival Series. Last night, 6 hours of modern-day GT3 racing, but today we can turn the clock back because 20 years ago the GT3 format began. It began at Silverstone with full grids, and over that period we've had some fantastic races, remarkable cars, some star names, and those early days are being brought back because SRO, along with Peter Auto, and also in consultation with motor racing legends, has put together this fantastic GT3 Revival Series, the cars for which have been practicing and qualifying over the previous 2 days. And today, as you see them heading out onto the circuit, the first of two 50-minute races is about to get underway. Mandatory pit stops between 20 and 30. You can have a co-driver if you wish. You can go solo if you wish. And it's as much a race as it is a trip down memory lane, with a chance to look back at the early days of GT3, and you can see as well how the cars have evolved. Even on this grid, take the Audi R8s, for example, how the first car looked compared to the later Ultra models. David Addison and Joe Osborne, trackside, getting misty-eyed because in some respects we've all been there since the start. I commentated at Silverstone on the first GT3 races, and Joe has driven the cars, and at least two on this grid are ex-Osborne chassis, aren't they?
Yeah, and luckily they weren't written off just on that fact alone. But yeah, the Audi you can see in shot was the first iteration of the R8, and yeah, fond memories of racing that in FIA GT3 with United Autosports back 2011. Got the V12 Vantage, the MB car was in, the Z4, and yeah, it's a plethora of options of cars. And it's not just the sights, it's the sounds as well. There was a bigger discrepancy of engine choice back in the day, it feels like, and it's great to hear all the differences.
Those early days, they were perhaps production sports cars plus, and GT3 has certainly evolved there. The BMW Z4 making its way onto the circuit, the Hershey family car, a fantastic shape and sound with that V8 engine, for which special dispensation was given because there wasn't a Z4 road car with a V8 engine. But in the early days of what was then Blancpain Endurance Series, that car, the Z4, taking on the Audis of WRT in a very Belgian affair. It really was, for 2 or 3 seasons, the main focal point. There is 888. The car run by the 888 team in period that was then Ian Harrison along with Lee Mole, who'd invested, and 888 had made its name initially in touring cars, and then Roland Dane, one of the founders, went off to Australia and absolutely blitzed V8 supercar racing with great success. That's a separate story. Ian Harrison continued running touring cars with great success in the UK, and then expanded to GT racing, and that Z4 clearly came from a really desperate time because they got you to drive it. Yeah,
exactly, and it was a fun car to drive, a race this car here actually in Blancpain back in the day as well, and it was a hard car to race sometimes. It was a very short wheelbase, so it was quite snappy, and it didn't quite have the torque of the Audi, for example, so you'd catch up because it had an amazing aero platform. You look at the size of the rear wing, but they also ran that secondary seat, the monkey seat wing we used to call it, in between the wing pylons, which is quite revolutionary. So you effectively had 2 rear wings on that car, and had some pretty trick stuff going on side. Had 2 crank sensors, so if you had a failure you could switch between them. 2 sets of fuel pumps. BMW had really thought about that car, and it was strong. You could hit people hard and get away with it. I remember that.
That was important. And this is what, sort of 5-6 years into the GT3 concept. So in that short space, they've really evolved, haven't they? From what were, like I say, production sports cars on steroids to that with aero, with all the gizmos.
Yeah, it's when the rules started to get bent, didn't it? The original concept of GT3 being road car based. Yes. And it was like, well, it could go on the road if it needed to, I guess, and then suddenly they're 90% race cars in the modern day iteration. And again, it's a successful formula, and GT3 has really done that. And it's good to see how competitive the Z4 still is in this championship as well. When you look at how fast some of the cars are around it, it's stood the test of time.
That was the car it was up against, the WRT Audi, that chassis, Christopher Mies, Christopher Huss, Stefan Ortelli's championship winning car. It's owned by Jean-Louis Rion, very experienced historic racer, and his regular co-driver Nick Padmore is with him. Jean-Louis will start this race. You start the race for which you qualified, and then the cars make their way around to the grid. Stéphane Rattel went to the driver's briefing on Friday, welcomed all of his customers to GT3 Revival, and in some cases back to GT3 grids. Pierre Hershey drives the car he drove in period on GT3 grids. Jean-Luc Beaubelic the same. Celia Martin here, along with Lindsay Brewer, the all-female partnership aboard number 40. one of those Ford GT, the Matek built cars, this car from the Clausen racing stable, but the Matek Fords, Martin Bartek, the late Martin Bartek's brainchild, really were very successful in those early days of FIA GT3. And having touched on that Ford GT, Lindsay Brewer will take it over. She is on the grid, and so too is Bryn Lucas.
Not the first time you've raced outside the US, but the first time you're here with this one, a brand new championship as well. And you're starting off, as you just said to me, with some bad fortune. The car's not behaving as it should. Yeah,
I mean, I'm so happy to be here. First European Series, first time at Paul Ricard circuit. It's been a dream to drive here ever since I could remember. So yeah, car's having a bit of issues. I've only done 5 laps total in it. So we're not starting where we want to be, and I think we just need to manage our expectations for the weekend, but just happy to be here, and we'll push upon that throughout the season.
What have you made of this circuit compared to what you're used to?
Honestly, first time here, it's not even on iRacing, so I came into it just kind of blind, but I enjoy it so much. I think for me, I'm struggling a bit in Sector 3 because European tracks are very flowy and fast, and I'm trying to find my rhythm there, but it's such an incredible track. Great first race of the year. There's a lot of runoff, but it's incredible. Yeah.
And the final question for you about this car itself. What's the car like to drive, and what are these issues that you've been telling us about?
Honestly, this car's super cool, first of all. But yeah, it's called GT3 Revival, so we are having a bit of older cars. Ours is a first gen as well, so we had power steering fluid, oil, the car was stalling. We've had several issues, but you know, we're working on them, and I think that's what this series is all about, is getting in these old machines and building them back up and just enjoying it. So it's been great to be able to be with Clausen and the team. And
they're mere teething problems, and you're supposed to have them in a car like this. We wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm going to enjoy.
Lindsay Brewer, the American model who's raced in touring cars in the States and single-seaters and Lamborghini Super Trofeo and the Saleen Cup. She's had a dabble at the Indy Next series as well. So an experienced driver, but coming, as she says, to Europe for the first time. And yeah, cars are being revived. You know, they've sat in garages for a year or more, and a decade or more in some cases. Yeah, okay, there have been GT3 races in the UK through MRL. We had a great centenary grid, didn't we, at Spa a couple of years ago, which included some GT3 machinery. But now there is a European platform for them to come and race. More and more are being tempted out of garages. But inevitably, if they've not run for a while, they will have some gremlins. Yeah,
and even if you take that car, you rebuild it, you prep it, you take it to a shakedown where you normally drive 20, 30 minutes, make sure everything's okay, and then you take it on a racetrack, the load and even doing a longer run can be the difference of finding those issues. So hopefully it's just first round gremlins.
Pole position is Benjamin Ricci. Let's hear from him. He's with Bryn.
We love the variety of cars out on the grid, the 458, so we've got a V8, we've got a V12 just behind you as well. It's fantastic to see. What's it like to drive this car, and you know, what's it like to be here at Paul Ricard in this brand new series?
Well, those cars are amazing. It's the old-fashioned GT3s. V8 is just great. Cars are light. It's just great pleasure to be here.
And you are a single driver lineup this weekend as well, so you've got all the hard graft to do.
Yeah, I'm supposed to race with my father, but unfortunately he could not make it. So it's more driving time for me and more fun, so all good.
What a shame, what a shame. Wish you the very best, thanks.
Thank you.
And the regulation under the pit stop for the single drivers is you've got to get out of the car, close the door, open it, get back in. If you're under 60, if you're a soloist over 60, you're allowed to stay in the car. Not only have the cars evolved externally, safety protection inside the cars it changed as well, because there you can see a lot more wrap round on the seat than on the Ferrari of Ricci.
Yeah, the SLS that we're looking in board now was the kind of first safe car almost, and you can see the gull wing doors. And I remember looking at this car with a customer who's looking at buying and goes, I don't want to be negative, but if you were to roll and land upside down, how would you open the door? And the German guy from Mercedes was very proud to say there's some explosive hinges and they will detonate when it goes over a certain angle, and you can just push the door away.
Really?
And you can then quote the famous Italian Job saying about the doors. And yeah, it was a fascinating thing, and Mercedes had really thought of everything.
And that car, an ex-Heinz-Harald Frentzen, Luca Stoltz chassis. It's Heiko Neumann at the wheel, a car run by Team Motor Park. Heiko himself has raced in International GT Open and the Asian Le Mans and Le Mans Cup, so another driver with quite a bit of GT3 experience. And it was that sort of SLS AMG GT3 that won the 24 Hours of Spa in, what, 2013 with Maxis Buch and Goetz and Ben Schneider. And on the back of that success and all the points they'd managed to collect, they then carried on and did the remaining 2 endurance rounds and won the championship. But they came in late, but absolutely mopped up. And that really did start Mercedes' great successful run in endurance racing. They were also doing a great job within the, as it then was, FIA GT3 European Championship, in which the Maxis won as well. Jean-Luc Beaubelic in his Ferrari that he raced in period, that car a regular on Spa 24-hour grids, and Jean-Luc Beaubelic with Jim Plas got to start as one of the favourites here.
Yeah, for sure. And then just looking at that Ferrari, that it's the seat that doesn't offer the protection that you're used to in a modern GT3 car. And I raced cars like this back in the day. You never thought about it. It's one of those things with safety. You don't realise it was dangerous until hindsight, and that's where the FIA look after the drivers so well, always trying to improve the safety standards year on year.
Where possible, the drivers are encouraged to have the cars in period colour schemes. Not all are. There is, for example, a period Audi but in a different livery from that it ran, but even so, it's great to have these cars on the grid. Adam Ballon on the grid as well this year.
Well, as the cars all fire up, a very quick word from you, Adam. It's great to see you in this car here, and what a lineup, you and Phil Keane.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Look, back to the old school, 2019 then 20, team back together again.
Are you just here for a bit of fun, or is winning the way?
What's that? Sorry?
Are you here for the win, or is it just a bit of fun?
Love a win, but really it's a bit of fun.
Good luck, good luck.
Adam Ballon, who we've seen racing in British GT and Lamborghinis. He's in a Lamborghini here, but it's a Gallardo. It's the LP560 FL2, which takes you back to Peter Cox driving the car, in fact, for the Rhinos Leipzig team within the German Championship, the ADAC GT Masters. There you can see the grid. Then we have 29 cars here. 28 got through qualifying. Dr. Afshin Fatemi with a problem, so he didn't venture out in qualifying, and that's a car that sadly will be missing from the grid. But the rest are there, and it will be a rolling start to 50 minutes. Some cars, inevitably, are going to be driven harder than others. Owners respectful of the value, but want to go racing in them. And the field accelerates away then behind the safety car. You see the Akuriakos BMW Z4, the ex-Marco Attard Alexander Sims British GT Championship winning car that then did ELMS events with the largely historic background in drivers of Alistair McCaig, Andrew Smith, Joe Twyman, Ollie Bryant. So through turn one, they turn, and this is how they're going to line up with Benjamin Ricci and Heiko Neumann at the front of the grid. Jonathan Mitchell in the Scott Sport Ran Aston is third, and Jean-Luc Beaubelic starts the first double driver entry fourth on the grid. Christoph von Oenhausen's BMW Z4 comes next with Philippe Georg, the company. Another driver from British GT, Matt Topham, sharing with Peter Molesdale for Barwell, and then Philippe Connasson alongside. Sean Lynn, the man behind Motor Racing Legends, is next in the Team Parker Racing run ex-TF Sport Aston. Adam Ballon's Lamborghini we've just talked about. Then a WRT Audi of Marcus van Oenhausen, and the Clausen Racing Matek Ford of Celia Martin. Danny Henry with the Corvette, and Sophie Norrie's Porsche. Then the Michelotto run Ferrari of Stefan Jöbstel. Mark Cole in the Quintet Racing Audi alongside, ahead of Franz Wunderlich and Pierre Hershey. Then you've got Christian Philippon and Jeff Isringhausen's Porsche. Jose Garcia is next alongside Nicolas Darquin. Then Jacques Combe and Daniel Debreuer with Jean Legras and Christian Kuhn on the penultimate row of the grid. The back row is Janos Santa and Jean-Luc Rion in Audi number 1. So that then is how they are going to line up. They will get themselves back into formation once they come toward the end of the lap. Paul Ricard, that's been a staple really on the GT3 calendar since the, as it then was, Blancpain Endurance Series was introduced. And because these are largely gentleman drivers, just to break up the speed on the Mistral straight, that big chicane put in about 2/3 of the way down. Heavy brake, a left, short straight to the right, and then it blends its way back onto the circuit, the original Mistral.
Although it is a big stop, you still get a high VMAX before that point. So without the chicane, 280, 285 Ks. With the chicane, still getting 245, 250. So yeah, you're losing the last 30, but it's still quick, and it's still a very quick corner here at Senior at turn 10.
Totally different sounds from those that we were hearing last night, particularly the Z4. It always looked spectacular, it always sounded spectacular. The Z4, a later generation from this car, so you have a snapshot of an era, not one given season. So inevitably, again, there are going to be cars that you know, may have been competitive in their given season, not as competitive on a grid like this because there's now more modern machinery against them.
Yeah, we're going to have a race within a race within a race, aren't we?
Yeah,
They're going to cluster together from their relative periods, and that's what's going to be exciting, and trying to see maybe a faster driver in an older car can make the difference and vice versa. So it's going to be a huge amount of action to keep an eye on.
There is the Ford GT that was obviously designed to stir the memories of the Ford GT40. You never saw many on the road, but enough were built to comply to the regulations, and the Matec team did a very good job. Thomas Much was really one of the star drivers. The late Ian Khan, British driver, also was a race winner in Ford GTs in the time. There you can see the leopard liveried Audi. It's not a car that ran that in period, as the cars accelerate then across the line, a second formation lap, but this one within the time. So the clock has started. Notionally the race is on, but they will then get themselves into formation at the end of the second lap. And all this on safety grounds. Gentlemen drivers, it's not actually the warmest of mornings. It's quite overcast at Paul Ricard. So just to make sure that there's a bit more temperature in when they go racing, Joel Duval, who is the race director, giving the drivers a second formation lap, but within the 50-minute allocation.
Yeah, wise moves. We've seen similar things in GT2, haven't we, where the cars are unable to use tyre ovens because they're not in the main garages. It's just a logistical nightmare. So you have to run ambient temperature tyres, and that takes a long time to warm up. They're very fast, very powerful, so if you were to start after one lap, the tyres would be a long way off their operating temperature. So unfortunately the risk is too high, and with the timetable being so tight, you can't afford not to go green. So yeah, this formation lap will give the drivers a good chance to get the tyres where they need to be.
And drivers of differing levels of experience. You know, some, as we've been talking about, have been GT3 drivers as AMs in period. Others have done quite a bit of historic racing and then come into this with it being a new exciting series to come to. Others, like for example Phil Keane, Alvaro Parent, have been GT3 guns for hire for manufacturers over a long period. Yeah,
and seriously fast, and they've won everything they could have as well in their respect. So yeah, that's going to be interesting in the pit stops as well, isn't it, when those two particularly get in, Jim Plough as well. It's going to be a very feisty second half of the race.
There, number 2 Audi's Marcus van Neuenhausen, who really came to prominence in Masters Gentleman Drivers races with his turquoise Jaguar E-Type, but the man behind the Bilsterberg circuit initially in Germany. The car, an ex-Andre Lotterer, Christopher Mies, Frank Stippler chassis, which was 3rd at Spa in 2013. So Marcus van Neuenhausen, whose son Christoph drives the 888 BMW. The family expanding into more recent GT3 cars.
He's a great character as Michael, and Bilsterberg is almost his personality laid in tarmac. It is a wild track. I remember driving it for the first time, going, oh, this will be okay, it's a relatively modern track, it'll be safe. And I was like, this makes the Nordschleife look like a sanitised playground. And yeah, I couldn't quite believe what they'd built, but fair play to him, he'd gone all in on it.
Yeah, he was very proud of the sort of Laguna Seca style corkscrew, wasn't he? Which was
with no runoff.
Absolutely, decidedly daunting, yes. A bit of input into it was from Walter Roll as well, from memory. So the cars now up at senior, this fast right-hander getting themselves into formation. Towards the rear of the grid, you can see the 997 Porsches. And how standard do they look compared to the modern-day 911 GT3R that we had racing last night? Of course, evolution happens. And of course, you know, in 20 years, a lot of that is going to take place. But chalk and cheese, those 911s.
They just look like a normal car with a really wide body kit on them, don't they, really? And a wing slaps on. And yeah, I remember racing the 997 back in the day. It was a phenomenally good car, but really quite basic. There was no real motorsport electronics on it in terms of the ABS and the traction control, but always a phenomenal car to drive. And with the engine in the rear, the traction's so strong on all of those Porsches.
And the Aston Martin as well. There you can see Jonathan Mitchell's car, run by Aaron Scott's Scott Sport team. Very quick racer himself, Aaron, years back. That's sitting on the second row of the grid. Quickly on board in number 40 there, the Celia Martin Clausen Racing run Ford GT, as now they get themselves into formation. Car not liking low revs.
You can see they just weren't optimised, were they? No. Again, all the manufacturers now realise the cars have to be optimised to look after the AM driver. I think she's had to go down on the clutch there to stop the thing from stalling and bucking around. So, yeah, it's going to be hard for her if the pace doesn't pick up before it goes green.
Celia Martin, part of the Iron Dames team in modern sports car racing in recent seasons. So on this second formation lap then, the cars make their way now towards the timing line. Effectively, therefore, we're going to be round about a 45-minute race once we go green. The lights on the gantry are red. If João Doval, the race director, is happy, he'll flick the lights. We will go racing to get the GT3 Revival Series underway. They accelerate away from the line. A decent start is made by Heiko Neumann on the outside. In fact, it's going to be the Mercedes SLS that leads down towards turn 1, but on the outside line, is he going to be able to cut across the front of Benjamin Ricci? He's not. They almost rub there as Ricci comes back on the inside and takes the lead away from Neumann. In third is the blue Aston Martin of Jonathan Mitchell, and then you've got Christoph van Oeynhausen's BMW Z4 in fourth as they accelerate down towards turn 3 for the first time.
Front row holding back with us. Is that the Mercedes under attack now from the Aston Martin? That's under attack from the Z4. Is Van Oosten going to have a look to the inside? And the Z4, he does thinks better of it, but it's looking racy, and at the moment the SLS is losing time to the leader.
Indeed so, because Benjamin Ricci is discernibly getting away as we hover over the Ford of Philippe Guillaume, who was another driver that was in the early Block Pan Endurance Series days, so an experienced GT3 racer. As now Jonathan Mitchell gets onto his toes to try to find a way past Heiko Neumann, the Aston Martin, the V12 Aston of Jonathan Mitchell, who's done quite a bit of successful racing in Caterhams as well as in Chevron B19s. Brakes late, runs wide, runs off the road, skips over the curb. That's going to compromise the run through the chicane. He's going to go wide there. And Christoph van Oeynhausen gets up alongside of the Z4, takes full advantage of that little mistake and goes up to third.
Great move. He saw it, didn't he? Went in deep to the chicane to cut back on the Aston. They're still side by side. Aston got roughed up and pushed wide, and the Z4 up to third place. Great move. And now what is the pace? Because the Mercedes seems to be struggling under braking, but has the torque and top speed to stay away at the moment.
And that was always one of the beauties, as it is now, of GT3. Now we talk a lot about the balance of performance, but here the Ferrari good through the corners, the Mercedes good in a straight line, and over a lap like this it'll all balance out.
Back in the day, there was a wider window, wasn't there, for what was acceptable in differences. The top speeds were varied by 15k, and that was how the bot worked, and the corner speed varied by that. Whereas now the window has become much, much smaller, the envelope, to keep the racing as fair as we see across all the brands. But back here is a little bit more Wild West with how it operated. So
there you've got Peter Cox attacking Christopher Mies, as in Adam Ballon in the ex-Cox Lamborghini, tucked up behind Marcus van Oeynhausen in the ex-Christopher Mies Audi over the timing line at the end of the first racing lap then. And already Benjamin Ricci clear by 1.8 seconds from Heiko Neumann. Christoph van Oeynhausen in third place, fourth Jonathan Mitchell's Aston, fifth is the Ford of Philippe Guillaume, and then the next to the Ferrari sixth, Jean-Luc Beaubelique, who's also dropped back a little bit compared to where he qualified.
Yeah, you can see on the graphics who's gained and who's lost, and the father-son combo have had a good opening part. They both gaining 2 places for the Van Oystens, so Ballon has lost that place, but at the moment this Ferrari will be very happy with the start. Like I said, David pulled up 1.8 seconds on that opening lap, and in qualifying was 1.1 seconds quicker than anyone. So is this going to be the story for the race? Can he keep that pace up for the remaining 42 minutes?
A car that's on the move after problems within qualifying is number 1, Jean-Louis Rion's early Audi, going back to 2012 season, and that car, it really is charging. It started last, it's up to 22nd now, so 6 places gained. As again Jonathan Mitchell gets the approach to the chicane wrong, just missed his braking point 2 laps in a row.
Yeah, he gets excited, doesn't he? He's trying to get the move done. He's concentrating on where the car is in front, it feels, and then misses his braking point, goes in deep and loses all that time, and has to then use the remaining 5.7 kilometres here at Paul Ricard to get it back.
You mentioned a lap ago about the Mercedes having dropped time to the leading Ferrari. Heiko Neumann is responding as the Audis get themselves together here. Neumann has done an absolute best sector 1 to get a little bit nearer to Benjamin Ricci. Coming out of the chicane there, number 1 is Jean-Louis Rion, the aforementioned, and he's on the attack still, isn't he? Getting himself now up to the back of the ex-Niki team, Rahul Frey, Marcus Winkelhock Audi in the hands of Nicolas Duquin. It looks to the inside, can't quite find a way by. But a storied car, that, the Duquin Audi, and all 3 of its earlier drivers were here in different roles in the GT3 race last night. One of them, Niki Tim, ultimately won it.
I wonder if they went and looked at the car for a bit of nostalgia to remember how it was back in the day. But yeah, I mean, Nicky Team had a pretty good night last night, so I'm sure he's had a good weekend.
Absolutely. Some drivers really do want to know about the history, don't they, and are happy to look back. Others just move on. Stefan Ortelli, who comes to these events to support the Pret family in the modern GT3 class, spent more time, I think, Friday, Saturday in the Revival paddock than the modern GT3 paddock, and it would be good to see Stefan Ortelli on the track. He did at Spa 2 years ago when he won the Centenary GT races. Now there, Jonathan Mitchell back ahead of Christoph van Ooyenhausen, so the Aston Martin, despite a couple of little moments, has got back through that ProDrive built car now, trying to fend off the BMW in its period colours, quite rightly. Bit of a twitch though, I think, there from Van Ooyenhausen, going out of turn 4. Got away with that into 5, but has lost another length or so.
Yeah, it happened somewhere in sector 3, and it was quite a slow sector for the BMW. So was it a mistake from Christoph, or was it just a very aggressive move from the Aston Martin? But yeah, like you said last lap, David, the Mercedes is responding pace-wise. Another purple sector 1 for this silver SLS. And now Mitchell seems to be pulling away from the Z4, doesn't it? So is it going to be a bit of a concertina up, and are we going to see a 3-car battle for the lead?
Yeah, because Neumann has done the fastest lap of the race now in his quest to get back onto terms with Benjamin Ricci. There is the Ford of Philippe Guillauc, I should say, and Jean-Luc Bobelic is behind. Jean-Luc next to the Ferraris, a car that he's had since it first hit the track. It's been in his possession, run by Jerome Policon's team. But Bobelic, as perhaps we've also seen in other categories in which he's raced, he gets more confidence as everything comes up to temperature, and now he's pushing harder.
Yeah, and you have to remember these cars haven't been raced for a long time too. Although he's owned the car since brand new, he'll be getting back into the rhythm of what it needs. And yeah, by the end of this race, for sure, he'll be chipping away at the lap times. He looks pretty confident, and it looks like the move is going to be on the cards in the next few laps.
Yeah, went a little bit deep at Ben D'Or, though, just ran fractionally wide, but Philippe Guillauc in the Ford, fending him off as they come then up now towards the end of the lap. The Ford being run by the Debar automobile team. Leader goes through, second goes through, the gap between them 1.7 seconds, and now Ricci responds by doing the fastest lap. Jonathan Mitchell there is third, Van Ooyenhausen is fourth. And we've had a moment from somebody within the last sector. Yellow flag shown. We'll try and work out who has gone a missing, if we can, as the cars stream over the line. So somebody has had a moment, and there's a yellow flag in that sector. Although looking at our tracking map, it does look as though everybody is moving.
I think it's Danny Henry was the car dropping away in the Callaway Corvette. He's not come through sector 3 yet. So that would be a shame for Danny.
But the yellow flag has now been withdrawn, so if he's had a spin, the Corvette will have lost places, but hopefully can pick up pace once again and rejoin, even if he's towards the back of the pack. Now there, Sean Lynn's Aston Martin going through, that TF Sport car that was a Team Turkey car, essentially. Sally Yoloch drove it in the European Le Mans Series. It also had a spell in Asia. And it was also a car that drove in British GT late in its life. Again, a Nicky Team car when he partnered Mark Farmer. But the likes of Richie Stanaway, Ewan Hankey drove it within ELMS along with Sally Yoloch. Sean Lynn, massively experienced driver in historic racing. He's got a fantastic collection of cars, as Sean, and now is a significant historic race promoter in the UK through Motor Racing Legends. Now there, in the pit lane, is the Audi of Jeff Isringhausen, the American Porsche dealer, and he's picked up a bit of damage on the front.
Yeah, is that the contact maybe with the Danny Henry car, which looked like it's been spun around because its last lap was 25 seconds off, so potentially a bit of contact there between the Audi and the Callaway Corvette.
Now, Sean Lynn talked about the car. He's put himself onto the back of Marcus van Ooyenhausen now, so the Aston bearing down here on the Audi, and you can see how by this stage, 13, 14, 15 generation cars, much more aero, much bigger rear wings. Yeah,
they'd really start to up the ante, and I think the torque of the V12 is good, but the Audi just seems to have the punch out the corners even still, so they've obviously got the Audi singing, and that'd be the other thing. Some of the teams, I'm sure, at different stages of development of the car. Is it how it left the showroom, or have they continued that development to find more performance?
Leaders go through, then lead gap going up again, 2 seconds. Benjamin Ricci getting away. Meanwhile, here you've got Ferrari versus Ford, and Jean-Luc Bobelic ahead of Philippe Guillauc. Accelerate down towards turn 3.
It was a good pass that. We saw him line up the lap before, and now he's finally done it into turn 1. So like you said earlier, David, he gets more confident and the pace comes. That definitely seems to be the case. So he's now up to the top 5.
The Ford was another one that had an exciting sound, didn't it? It was a sort of crashing sound that the engine made, a bit like the Z4. It shattered the air as it came past you. That was always another, and still is, one of the features of GT3 racing, the different sounds as well as the different shapes of the car.
Yeah, it looks like the Audi's got a problem. His left pit lane, either just trying to stay out of the way or it's a bigger issue.
And its pit time is still being recorded, oddly. So there you've got the cars coming through the chicane. So the Ford looking for a playmate, and it's going to get one, I think, shortly. Number 20 there, Philippe Guillaume goes through, but he's being caught now by the pack behind. Also going strongly behind the Ferrari of Philippe Collinson is Matt Topham. There in the background, coming towards us in the black and blue Barwell Motorsport Ex-Ecuria Cos Z4. And yeah, you're right, the Audi hazard lights on, keeping out of harm's way. That's got a proper endurance feel to it, isn't it? You know, a troubled car limping back to the pit lane, getting out of harm's way.
Just trying to stay in the race.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's on an outlap, but hopefully they can have a look at what the problem is and get it working again. Just go on board with the Z4. This is the sector where Lindsay Brewer is saying it's particularly physical and hard, and she needs the commitment. Interesting to see how Martin's getting on through here. Sounds okay, doesn't it? Doesn't seem to be an obvious problem. Steering looks okay. Maybe power steering sometimes in these older cars wasn't up to standard, and under high load it would lock out, and so suddenly you couldn't really turn the car because the power steering had enough of trying to help you. So at the moment, looking all good aboard of this Ford GT40 number 40.
And that was a car really that never did anything else, partly because of the death of Martin Bartek, I guess, and the Matek team struggled accordingly. But it never did anything in the longer endurance GT3 races, did it? It was very much a car for what was the FIA GT3 European Championship, that were those 2 1-hour, effectively sprint races. Yeah,
yeah, very true. And it was dominant at times, wasn't it? I remember when it came in, it did a one-off race at British GT, I remember, with Bradley Ellis and Alex Mortimer of RPM, and it was a revolutionary change. It was like, wow, this is the new generation. And now look at it, it was really the first car of the second generation of GT3 cars, I would say. So now it's getting shown up by some of the third generation cars and fourth, and yeah, it's hard to quantify where we're at now, but we're definitely on the 7th or 8th generation of GT3.
Yes, because you've got Evos and then Evo 2s in modern day entry lists, but what, like all historic categories really, is the great breadth of car on the grid here. So different shapes, different sizes from different years, yes, recreating lots of memories, and also finding playmates accordingly. So now Celia Martin's Ford, for example, being caught by Anne-Sophie Nouri's Porsche. That is Sean Lynn accelerating out of the chicane and making the run up towards the right-hander of Senior. Sean Lynn currently in 10th place, going after Marcus van Oeynhausen. The gap between those two coming down a little bit now, 7/10 of a second. And there they are. So the Audi ahead of the Aston Martin. Sean, whose 2 sons both race. Max was racing last night for Bob Neville's team RJN in the opening round of GT World Challenge Europe Endurance Cup. And Alex Lynn, pole position at Le Mans last year, now very much an accomplished sports car racer, having come out of single-seaters in the UK, and on occasions Alex tempted to come and share some of Dad's historic cars. But right now, Sean driving solo, all over the back of the number 2 Audi, looking for position as the leaders have done now 7 laps, and under braking the gap comes down a fraction. A very Audi livery that, with R8 down the side, the Quattro signage on the back, on the rear wing of Marcus van Oeynhausen's car as he goes across the line, and Jeff Isringhausen's Audi back into the pit lane.
Yeah, it was when Audi was fully invested, wasn't it, in their GT program. They had everything marketing-wise ramped up to support that, and it was so successful. They were really the manufacturer in GT3. They raised the bar with everything. Really, the customer support they offered was much higher than anyone else. So you didn't have to carry your own spares. Audi would bring the truck, and you could take stuff off there. And there's an Audi that maybe needs a spares truck.
Indeed, it is facing the wrong way, and that is the Nicolas Docking car that has had a spin coming out of the Virage de la Tour towards the Virage du Pont. Let's have a look at how it got there. Was it all self-induced? Yep, squeal of tyres around it goes.
Yeah, just a bit late turning in, was almost a car width too wide and just on the dirtier, less grippy. Everyone did well to avoid that, didn't they? And the problem with that is these older cars, much more sensitive. As soon as you run backwards, the wheel speed sensor goes, this isn't right, and it has a full moment, and it's a long process to get that car restarted. It is an on and off, but you have to let everything go to sleep, and that's a variable time, 20, 30, 40 seconds, and then you rush it because you want to get going, and it hasn't slept, and you have to restart that process again. So hopefully it's an easy one to get going, but at the moment still sat there in between the two apexes at turn 14.
Drivers now getting ready for stint 2. And amongst them will be Pascal Houteau, who's been a class champion in the last couple of years in the GT4 European Series. So we've still got that yellow flag, race direction, giving Nicolas Doquin a little bit of time to, as Joe was explaining, get the car fired up and get going again. Jonathan Mitchell goes through then in the Aston. Now only a second and a half back from Heiko Neumann, and Christoph van Oeynhausen's dropped back but has stabilised in 4th place as the BMW Z4 rounds turn 1. And the pit window now open, just to make the point.
Yeah, Christoph actually sent me his on-board, sorry,
pit window is postponed. So it says window on one graphic on the timing screen, but pit window is postponed, it now says on the message line, because I'm assuming we might be going to a full course yellow to move that car.
Yeah, it was an awkward place as well for pit entry, wasn't it? And now it's moving, so that's good news. Going to go straight to pit lane by the looks of it as well, and yeah, I think it'll be a quick postponement then. As soon as that car's in, we should be able to open the pit window. I just hope the drivers are getting that communicated from the teams, and a lot of the drivers will just be running a stint time, and they'll know after 20 minutes of the race they're good to come in, but at the moment the pit is still closed.
Had a Porsche there, I think, rejoining from a strange place. That might have been Christian Kuhn's car. There's the race leader anyway, Benjamin Ricci, who has made short work of the opposition thus far. Benjamin very experienced in GT4, GT3, GT2 machinery, and the Ferrari accelerates its way up to the Virage de la Tour. Benjamin Ricci's 458 GT3 Evo, so one of the later 458s, which in itself was a successful car not only in SRO events but also in Italian GT racing. And of course there was, like Lamborghini and Porsche had, a less aero-effective car, if you like, in the One-Mate Championship.
Yeah, the challenge cars have always been very popular for Ferrari. The pit window is now open, but we do have a yellow flag at turn 8 currently.
And that's the reason why it looks as though number 40 Ford has stopped. Is that Celia Martin's car? That's in an awkward place.
Yes, it had a big spin. You see the tyre marks behind it under braking and something locked up and sent her around. I don't know, but my worry there would be if something has locked on the rear axle, it's probably locked solid, and that car isn't going to be able to get going under its own steam or recovered quickly either. That could be a full lift.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it's in the, to say the middle of nowhere is a bit unfair, but it's not easy for marshals to get to that, is it? Because it's, as you can see, right in the middle of that very wide expanse, because it's a wide circuit anyway. But then if you think about the fact you've got the chicane, you can see where the recovery vehicle is coming from. It's a long, long journey. Right, the car comes to the chicane, brakes, spins, and around it goes.
Yeah, really odd one, that one. The ABS should have saved it. We'll see on board. So initially the braking's okay. It was that 5th down to 4th. Suddenly you could hear the gearbox chatter and the thing just turned itself off. So I do think something in the drivetrain has given up and locked solid as we see our pit stops starting now.
That in the TF colours is Sean Lynn's Aston Martin, being run by Stuart Parker's eponymous squad, and others now electing to come in. But I suspect if that Ford won't restart, we're going to get through the pit window, and as soon as everyone has done a stop, then we'd have the race neutralised to move it. Yeah,
exactly. Something that just made me feel, oh, the Ford's got going. Amazing. So that's good.
Yeah.
And that saves us a long safety car potentially as well. It's making myself feeling old. The chief mechanic there for Sean Lynn, Aaron, was my apprentice mechanic when I raced the track speed 997 Porsche back in 2011, I believe it was, or 10. So yeah, definitely. I think I might be old now. It might be official.
Yeah, if you know it's happened when you talk about historic races, trust me. Their race leader, Benjamin Ricci, really has been dominant in this. The nose of the car hits the ground, doesn't it, as he brakes for the Virage du Pont, accelerates up to complete another lap. Meanwhile, Franz Wunderlich gives way to Pascal Hutto in the R Racing Aston. That was the team that managed to take a win with Ricky Collard and Marvin Kirchhofer at the Nürburgring in, what, 2019? They also ran Astons briefly in the DTM, but I don't think they ultimately had the support they wanted, so the team is no more. Shame, because it did, with a lot of promotion, come along and do well.
Yeah, it was a strange programme, that. Am I right in saying it was Mercedes pulling out of DTM and they took the project on? It was kind of a rebranded Aston, and yeah, R Racing at one point were looking like they're going to be a global force, weren't they? And suddenly kind of fell off the radar quite quickly.
I would say that they were two Swiss sort of medical magnates that were behind the company. Meanwhile, you can see the pit stops are cycling through, therefore cars being released onto the circuit, including the leopard liveried Audi. That's the Mark Cole Alvaro Parent chassis, and as soon as Alvaro gets behind the wheel, it's going to fly. Mark Cole, a very quick and experienced national racer from the UK. There is Pascal Hutto down the pit lane. He was a star with Alain Ferté in the GT4 European Series 2 years back in an Alpine champion as well. So he'll be a quick driver for the remainder of the race, which is 25 minutes, bang on halfway. Yeah,
it's gone quickly, hasn't it? And I thought at one point Mitchell in third place was going to catch Newman, but that has stopped at the moment. Van Ulsen is kind of in no man's land, isn't he? He's 5 seconds behind and then 7 seconds ahead of the Ferrari behind him. So everyone, like we said earlier, is just going to find their battle pack depending on the age and performance of their car.
Now, Jean-Luc Beaubelique has given way to Jim Pla. Jean-Luc Rion, number 1, up into the top 10 from the back of the grid and giving way soon to Nick Padmore. That'll be one to watch, as here Pierre Hershey brings his BMW Z4 into the pit lane, a car he raced in period, both in French GT and in Blockpan Endurance Series races. Now, he was going to share with his son Jonathan, but I think Pierre has ultimately decided to go solo this weekend, certainly for the race he is. So, leader comes through. Benjamin Ricci will put 11 laps in the book as he comes across the timing line. Still the pit window is open and still quite a few takers. Now Jonathan Mitchell is in with the blue Aston Martin. He was third and he's coming into the pit lane. There he is in the background.
Yeah, solo driver, so no driver change is going to be needed. Has lost use of one of its headlights. So, luckily, no nighttime running for these cars like their modern day GT3s last night, racing from 6 p.m. till midnight local time last night.
But Jonathan Mitchell should get out of the car under the regulations, close the door. You can just see him clambering out in the background. So you get out, you close the door, open the door, and then hop back in. So it's effectively doing a driver change because you've still got that time loss of getting in and out of the car.
Yeah, and that can then make mistakes happen, of course, having to put the belts back on, the radio and the window net, depending on how old the car is, of course. And yeah, so I think it's a fair rule to at least level the playing field for everyone.
And so that's Heiko Neumann's Mercedes that was earlier on chipping away to try to get back onto terms with the leading Ferrari, but Neumann has just never been able to do it, has he? He did early on do a quick lap, but that was soon bested by Benjamin Ricci. So Neumann settling into second place, quicker than those behind, but not as quick as the man in front.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair assessment of it. So far been super consistent, however, though, so maybe had to pick off a few cars that start to tire, or drivers that start to tire in the remaining 22.5 minutes.
Corvette there, Danny Henry's car back into the race. What you might call the sort of conventional Corvette shape. The current GT3 car looks so radical, doesn't it, compared to the old grunt and go front engine Chevrolets. Benjamin Ricci's Ferrari 458 GT3 Evo coming up towards back markers with 22 more minutes of the race to go, and Benjamin working out when the pit stop is needed, and it's going to be this time as he bails for the pit lane, and a long pit lane it is.
Yeah, he couldn't really afford to go much longer. It would have been pretty close to the pit window closing if he did another lap, and he had that slow Porsche. I think it was a wise move to bail for pit lane then.
But Neumann is going to carry on, and he's got just under 2 minutes, and I think he's going to be out of time because he can't. Can he get back to the pit lane in time?
No, he can't, unless, we haven't seen it on the timing screen, but because the window was postponed, has it all shifted by the time it was delayed by, that would be the only thing, but it's a lot of risk for no reward, in my opinion.
Yeah, because you're not necessarily going to gain places on that. He was in a very safe second spot. There you could see Benjamin Ricci getting out, getting back in as the Ford comes in, Porsche goes out. Pit stops as Imperial, of course, key to these races. So there is the notional race leader now, Heiko Neumann, who leads on the road.
Yeah, just the pit window was postponed by 1 minute and 4 seconds, so it could be staying open until there's 18 minutes and 56 seconds remaining. But like I said, especially when you're a solo driver, the pit stop's even less important because you're not changing drivers, so the lap time before and after should be the same.
Yeah, you just got to get it done. It's just a regulation that you have to tick off, so there's no strategy involved, is there?
No, the only part would be a tyre pressure bleed, but we're talking marginal gains here, so not worth the risk.
Right, Celia Martin out of the Ford, Lindsay Brewer now in. That car, of course, delayed after its spin, so it was down in 20th place when Celia Martin brought it in.
And interesting, the team plugging in with the laptop, that's not standard procedure for a sprint pit stop, so maybe just checking everything is okay with that car.
Pierre Hershey on his toes up the inside in his Z4, getting past the Anne-Sophie Nouri Porsche. Pierre Hershey, another very, very, very experienced driver who seems to have been around GT cars for a huge number of years. He was even a Formula 3 racer in both France and in the Swiss Formula 3 Championship going back to the 1990s. So massively experienced, Pierre. And Jonathan Hershey, his son, raced at Le Mans, raced in the FIA GT1 World Championship, has gone rallying as well in the European and World Rally Championship events. So a real motorsport family.
Yeah, and again, that's been the mainstay of GT3, isn't it? Their AM driver really being the anchor to the grid, and fair play to Stefan Mattel. He's always recognised that as his main customer base and not got excited about big manufacturers coming in with big presence, because they come and go quite quickly. The board of directors, the marketing budget suddenly gets pulled and they go, but your AM driver will always be there enjoying driving around in circles.
And again, that's one of the backgrounds to GT3 racing. Stefan had his fingers burnt with manufacturers in the FIA GT days of the late 90s. What he's always wanted is manufacturers to build cars and teams to run them. It's their bread and butter. They will continue to do that. That's their business. So manufacturers build cars, sell them on, but then the teams are the ones that need to keep people in them, need to get cars on the grid. Heiko Neumann is now into the pit lane. So he's okay. The window has remained open. You're right, it was just nudged back a little bit. And Heiko Neumann goes through that pit stop. One of the other big successes of GT3, because it was an instant full grid when it began in the FIA GT3 European Championship, was that Stefan, having convinced the manufacturers to build cars, said you need to build a minimum of 6 and you need to get 3 different teams to run them. That's a condition of entry. So you can sell cars to the teams, but you need to build 6 and you need to get 3 different teams. So straight away, teams became invested in the championship.
It's a big, strong arm move, isn't it?
Yeah.
That I want you to build cars, and you've got to build 6, and it's 3 teams. And
yes, Stefan. Yes, Stefan.
Everyone bought into it because they could see the ethos and where it was going to go.
Yeah.
The bit I think about GT3 was Stefan's vision. It didn't exist. The concept was new. Balanced performance had never been heard of. And you can tell he's right, because look at the success for so many years now. And it's got to have been one of the best formulas ever created in motorsport.
Yeah, the balance of performance, which we now talk a lot about, kind of was bubbling around at the time, but largely thanks to a car from a different GT rule set, the Maserati MC12, and that was in danger of taking a coach and horses through the regulation. So it was the late Peter Wright and the late Max Mosley, in fact, who said we really need some sort of way of slowing that car down as best we can, and they talked about ride height and restrictors, and that was where the BOP really came from. Rather than say, no, you can't run, they said, yeah, all right, we'll have you in, but we need to just make sure that you're on the same sort of pace, and that was where it all came from.
I remember how small the rear wing as well got on that Maserati, trying to slow it down.
Yeah.
It started the size of what we're seeing on the V12 Vantage, and it was like my nan's tea tray by the end of it. So yeah, that was a phenomenally fast and beautiful car in its own right.
Yeah, it was indeed. They were worked cars initially when the MC12s appeared in 04, and then private teams got their hands on them. But all of that takes us away from what we have on track at the moment. Heiko Neumann then versus Benjamin Ricci. The cars accelerating their way along the straight up towards the chicane, and under braking it all gets very busy indeed. Ferrari brave on the brakes there, up the inside of 2.
Yeah, had to get past the 430 Ferrari, didn't they? That's held up Neumann much more, and look at Ricci's been able to pull a couple of seconds now. Let Mitchell back on the rear of the Mercedes, so the traffic affecting second place much more than our leader.
Benjamin Ricci getting past Audi number 3 there, that has now, despite the spin from earlier on, been taken over by Hugues Ricard, the man behind the Spark model brand. based these days at Hong Kong, but racing in Europe once again. Smart models, the envy of many, and also filling many a GT fans model cabinet.
Yeah, I've tried to get every single car I've ever raced, and Spark do such a good job. The detail, you look inside, you go, wow, they've even got the fire extinguisher in the right place.
Yeah.
And, it's just a complete chance to geek out. And I don't know how many models they made, but it must have been the tens of thousands, I would have thought, by now.
And they always have a roaring trade going at Macau with, you know, the special models for the special liveries, the one-off liveries that run in the GT races there. Heiko Neumann battling now with Jonathan Mitchell as they come across the line. The other Ferrari that is making good progress is Jim Pla. We've not really touched on this. He's up to second. There's the fight for third, with Jonathan Mitchell getting ahead in a straight line in the cycloptic Aston Martin. On the inside line is Heiko Neumann, who's going to get the place back into turn one. But Jim Pla now lapping quicker than the leader, and we could be on here for Jim Pla and Jean-Luc Beaublic to take the win. You're looking at third, but up the road, the gap's coming down between the top two. Mitchell again on the attack as they get up towards turn three. Late on the brakes, through he goes.
Great move, wasn't it? And fair driving by both, but you could see Newman just trying to close the door. And I think at the moment, Mitchell's got the pace to get away from that Mercedes. But you're right, Jim Pla has been in the car for 11 minutes, so they did their pit stop early.
Yeah.
He's making really good inroads right now.
I wonder why that Mercedes is fading. Is Heiko Neumann getting tired? Is the car going off the boil? Because, okay, you can kind of argue he could lose the place to Jim Pla quite legitimate because Jim's very, very fast. But that Aston Martin has come from quite a big gap that had opened up early on in the race now to be ahead of the Mercedes.
Yeah, and in the pit stop, they did actually bleed the tyre pressures right at Mercedes, so it should have given it a reset and a bit of a second go at life, but it definitely doesn't seem to be performing as fast as it was at all earlier on. And just looking at Jim Pla, he's obviously second overall but first in class. You've got the different numbers there, the red being the AM class and the green being Pro-Am, so Jim Pla will be getting close in every lap.
There is Pla getting past Danny Henry, who, like in the McLaren Trophy Europe, in which he raced last year, he goes solo. So Danny has always done a great deal of drive time, doesn't want to share it. We've got a 13-second time penalty being applied to a car for being short on the pit stop, and it is the number 94 Aston Martin of Janos Santa. So Santa delivers a short pit stop, but will have to have time added on at the end of the race. Jim Pla, in the meantime, hustling on, quicker in sector one, lost a little bit of time in sector two, possibly with the traffic, but the leader, Benjamin Ricci's lap, just completed at 2 minutes 8. Jim Pla slower because he got caught in traffic, so the gap stabilises again at 6.5 seconds.
Yeah, he should be clear now though, Jim Pla. Looks like at least the next sector or two can give it everything and try and get that gap further down.
To the inside line there, Alvaro Parent on Peter Moldsdale. Alvaro Parent, a McLaren specialist for many, many years, goes through in the car that he shares with Mark Cole. Although it's in WRT colours, it's actually an old Rosberg team car. That was where it came from originally. The likes of Kenneth Heyer and Michael Ammermüller would have driven it, and then it went to other teams. It was crashed, I think it was at Zandvoort, by Cesar Campanico in about 2014, and the previous owner, rather like that leopard livery, got in touch with WRT's Vincent Voss and said, would you mind? And Vincent said, no, go for it. So it's a period livery, but not one that car carried, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, it's a good livery, wasn't it? It was always distinctive, easy to spot.
Yeah.
With that turquoise highlights on it compared to so typical black, white and red WRT Audis of that time.
So Alvaro Parent taking over from Mark Cole and now in 9th place. His next target is Phil Keane, who's taken over from Adam Ballon. As far as the lead is concerned, 6/10 pulled back in sector 1 by Jim Pla and a full second pulled back in sector 2 on this lap by Jim Pla. So when the traffic permits, Jim's going for it. I suspect also he was being very respectful of the gentleman drivers as he was going through the traffic. Had that been a modern day grid, he would have been a bit more cavalier.
Yeah, I'm sure of that, and that's how it should be. That's where I think this series has been positioned. It's fun and competitive, but a slight different change.
So there you got the Audi up towards the chicane. Those 458s on a special 19-inch tyre and rim for this series. They're all on Pirelli tyres, but it's a different tyre, especially for those 458s.
Yeah, that was a big thing back in the day, the amount of different tyre sizes for each manufacturer. And Pirelli and SRO, through homologation, have really narrowed that down. And I think now there's only 4 or 5 who see this spinner there at turn 1, just out of the way, but an awkward place to rejoin.
Yeah, the Porsche has swapped ends and is about to get going. 911, Christian Kuhn at the wheel of it. That car's been a little bit off the pace in this race. Christian Kuhn, not the most experienced of drivers, certainly not in any kind of GT3 machinery, so very much a learning weekend, but he's got going again. That's the good news. So the yellow zone disappears. The race now has 11 more minutes as Benjamin Ricci is still being caught by Jim Pla. 4 seconds last time the gap.
Yeah, not the best sector 1 though for Jim Pla. He actually lost 2.5 seconds, so that could have just been the difference with the Porsche being there, and he had to slow down for a yellow, but that has halted the charge ever so slightly.
There is Pla, but you can see the way that he's attacking the curbs. Jean-Luc Boblic has looked after Jim for many, many seasons and employed him as the co-driver. Jim, like so many, began in single-seater racing and was very quick in the French Formula Renault Campus Series. Jonathan Mitchell is behind in 3rd spot. 4th now is Heiko Neumann's Mercedes. Christoph van Oeynhausen is 5th, and 6th is still Philippe Guillaume in his Ford GT as Jim Pla goes into the double wide of Le Beausset. There's your leader, Benjamin Ricci, and in the first sector of the lap he was about 1.5 seconds, 2.5 in fact seconds quicker than Pla, but Jim has brought it down again by 0.5 second in sector 2. So by the end of the lap, I think Benjamin Ricci will have had a slightly greater gap. He would have extended it given the time lost under the yellow flag in sector 1, but we know that Jim Pla is attacking all the time now.
Yeah, and the headlight, interesting, coming on and off on that Mitchell car, and yeah, they're not going to race at night, but that's the other advancement, massive in modern days, the headlights. Spa 24 I did in a V12 Vantage like this. I don't know if this is actually the chassis. There is one of them out there that's the chassis I raced, I can't remember, with MP Motorsport, and it was like driving with 2 candles on sticks. You could see absolutely nothing, and then it would rain, and you would just muscle memory going, I know there's a corner somewhere, and then you'd be through Eau Rouge, and it was, yeah, huge advancement in the light technology that all cars have benefited from now.
Yeah, I think your Aston Martin, as it were, is the Janos Santa car that's being done for a short pit stop. That was the Mark Paul, Richard Abra car. But also Colin White, former National Hot Rod World Champion, drove with Tom Sharp in British GT races. Don't hear very much of Richard Abra and Mark Paul anymore in GT terms.
No, both good guys and became good friends. Mark got busy with work and he stopped, and yeah, Richard went back to the family business. But yeah, we had a lot of fun together, and yeah, Mark was pretty quick by the end of it. Still loves his cars, more of a historic guy now. Got some old Alphas and Porsches, but yeah, again, such a good reason to get into motorsport. GT3, he just loved the whole experience, being able to race on these F1 grade circuits in relatively fast cars back in the day.
And that was always one of the early key points of the Blancpain Endurance Series, to take people to Formula One venues, because that was another selling point. So, you know, you would come here, or Monza or Manicourt had an Endurance Series race, Silverstone another in the early days, and yeah, tracks that meant something because you could relate to a Grand Prix circuit more than, let's say, Nogaro or Snetterton.
Yeah, it's just a cool experience. I remember Mark saying just like to be able to talk to his mates at the bar that he'd raced at Spa in an Aston Martin, and it's quite a cool thing, isn't it? And it gets into a bit of a competition between your mates. And I remember him actually saying he loved the Z4, but didn't want to be able to say to his mates, I raced a BMW. He wanted the brand of Aston Martin to be able to brag about it, and I'm sure the V12 helped sell it as well. But a Porsche with an issue in pit lane that looks like it could be terminal.
Yeah, sadly. So that's the car of Jean Legras, the Gulf livery. The Ricci-Pla battle is down to 3.2 seconds and 7 minutes on the clock. So Jim Pla is going the right way about this, but he is still needing to find a little bit of time. A lap is round about the 2:07 mark, so maybe 3 more laps. He might just about be able to get there on the last lap of the race and then go for the position. As you see Danny Henry's Corvette come rumbling up the inside. One of the quickest of the Corvette drivers in GT3 Europe was the spectacular Frenchman James Riffier. That car, a throwback to the colour scheme that he ran as well. On board then now with Lindsay Brewer. Delayed early on with that spin for Celia Martin. 23rd Very much a learning exercise all round. A new car for both and a new circuit, certainly for Lindsay.
Yeah, balance of the car looks good, like we drove on with Martin. This is again the sector where Lindsay said on the grid to Bryn she was struggling with, and yeah, can see there of Bender just not letting the car run out wide, and maybe the car is a bit too leery to get on the throttle earlier than that. But now it's starting to look a bit hard work, soaring away at the wheel, then the slow final corner way down to first gear, unwind the lock and trying to get on the throttle. You can see it fighting her over to the exit curve there. Yeah, maybe a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde car, timer on the dash. So basic, the dash, isn't it? Just a monochrome, no delta, just your gear number, lap time. I can see obviously the RPM, your speed, and that is about it. No live telemetry either. So again, the advancements have just been staggering from this period onwards.
Physical car as well. You can see the effort that Lindsay Brewer has to put into this as the speed now builds through turn 3. Hard on the brakes, down towards turn 4 and 5. Ride the curb. There's a big rumble curve on the inside that you really don't want to hit. You want to straddle it or be on the inside of and avoid it altogether. First gear corner in some cars at 5. Long right at 6, and there's the lead gap, but it is coming right down. 1.4 seconds now with just over 5 minutes to go. It's on now, isn't it, for Jim Pla?
Really is, and the interesting bit, exactly the same car, obviously 458 and the Evo variation, so the overtaking always harder when you're exactly the same car. But at the moment, Jim Pla's got so much pace. If he can keep that momentum, should be able to slip down the inside at one of the brake zones.
Should indeed, as he comes then now up through the right-hander of the Virage du Camp, the big campsite behind that part of the racetrack, and then the cars accelerate their way on towards the Mistral Straight, up towards Senior. Many of the corners here named after local towns, and Senior, it will be the next significant corner after the chicane to break up the straight, and the lighting panels there warning of a slow car. The Porsche of Jean Legras back into the race, but slowly, and Ricci on borrowed time now. In the first sector, he was half a second slower than Jim Pla, and it's now, what, 3 lengths?
Yeah, if that, and Jim Pla aggressively rotating the car hard on the gas. Again, these cars being that bit more primitive, the traction control system's not helping as much, so you tend to run them lower so they don't become too intrusive. It looks like Jim Pla's confident enough to get this 87 Ferrari sliding everywhere. So
Jim Pla, who is very much a gun for hire, and Benjamin Ricci, who's a quick AM, I think it's fair to say, an AM plus, trying to fend him off, but Jim Pla gets up alongside as they come out of Le Beausset then, and he's going to go round the outside, up towards Bendor, through he goes. Nice move, that.
Really good move, and Ricci saw it coming. He'd left space from on the apex previous as well, realising it's a position overall, of course, but not for class. So Ricci concentrating on his class battle, which is all the way back to John Mitchell now 17 seconds behind.
So they're coming up towards the timing line, and through will come the new race leader, Jim Pla. He'll break the beam in a moment and go through with Benjamin Ricci. They're down in second place. We've got a car off, though, in the last sector, so a yellow flag once more as 3 minutes to go. So 2 more laps for them as they go down towards the first left at turn 1. And Jim Pla, now that he's hit the front, can just redress his pace a little bit. He doesn't have to keep pushing, and it is the Jean Legras Porsche that has stopped once again. So it's not a car off in terms of a spin, it's just pulled off and parked with that mechanical woe. We saw it in the pits, we saw it slow on the track. There is Phil Keane, who is pushing on to try and get himself even further up the order for the car's owner, Adam Ballon. The Barwell run Lamborghini round the outside of the Audi, so Keane charging on. He's got the Ford behind, as well as that Marcus van Neuenhausen's R8, which is a car that's now dropped off the lead lap, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, can't have been on pace, because Van Neuenhausen was quick, wasn't he, in the opening part, running near the top 10 quite comfortably. So maybe a slow pit stop for that car.
So through they turn again over the line, and Van Neuenhausen perhaps did have an issue in the pit lane, but he's back up and running now. But Phil Keane in the Lamborghini 6th, Philippe Guillaume behind in 7th as they run up towards turn 2 with just under 2 minutes on the clock now. Yeah, that Audi's actually had 2 pit stops. We've missed that, so that has had to come in. So that's why it's a lap down. The Porsche done a good job of getting out the way, hasn't it, on the inside of Senior. So yes, it's a yellow flag, but they'll be happy to run to the end without safety car. 87 goes by, and that is the Jim Pla chassis then. It was 7/10 up when it came across the stripe last time, but Pla still building that lead, and it'll be a very happy Jean-Luc Beaubelique, who has barely missed a season, it feels like, in the last sort of 30 years of racing. Normally in GT cars, regularly in Ferraris, but we've seen him in a Mercedes as well, in GT2 and GT4 as well of late. There is Christoph von Oeynhausen masquerading as Joe Osborne in the 888 Z4, riding the curb a little bit at senior, and that car is currently second within Pro-Am.
Yeah, he'll be really happy with this. Christoph actually sent me his onboard video from qualifying yesterday just to say any tips, and I had to say to him, mate, it looks really good. And a couple of braking points. The hard bit was knowing where the car's at setup-wise. That Z4 had a pretty narrow window where it was happy. Otherwise, like I said earlier, it could be quite a snappy car on the rear. But yeah, his limited experience pace is not showing that's for sure.
So Jim Pla actually being caught a little bit again by Benjamin Ricci. That gap down to around about 0.6 of a second as they drop towards the Virage du Cap, but it's the last lap, as you can see on the graphic. So Jim Pla and Jean-Luc Beaubelique are going to score honours. In some respects, this is quite appropriate. It's going to be a Ferrari win because the first FIA GT3 European Series race was won by a Ferrari. Alan Simonsen and Hector Lester won the first race at Silverstone back in 2006. And so then as now, Ferraris to the fore.
Yeah, so that would have been a 430 for Lester and Simonsen. Yeah. So yeah, the generation before, of which there's one on the grid, isn't there? 430 Scuderia, a very fast car, had a very fragile gearbox. So you remember racing against it, you didn't have to worry too much because it was going to blow up at some point. And then this 458 again really moved the game on when this one was launched.
And by this stage, the manufacturers were thinking of the customers and making the cars user-friendly. Audi was perhaps the first manufacturer that really did cater very much for the gentleman racer and make cars that were easy and simple to go racing and didn't bite, whereas the McLaren MP412C was very much, and we haven't got one on the grid, I'll grant you, but that was very much a car that the AMs thought, yeah, love one of those, and quite soon regretted it. We seem to have lots of them crashing at Monza in the second season of the Blancpain Endurance Series. But Jim Pla and Jean-Luc Beaubelique mastering the Ferrari, and the 458 then making its run up through the last couple of corners. Checkered flag will be at the ready, and for Jérôme Policon's squad operating the car for Jim Pla, for Jean-Luc Beaubelique, it's going to be a great debut within the GT3 Revival Series, a new series on the SRO portfolio for 2026, and a Ferrari 1-2 at Paul Ricard. Jim Pla, Jean-Luc Beaubelique win. Benjamin Ricci comes home second, and it should be Jonathan Mitchell's Aston Martin in third place. There he is. Benjamin Ricci will be the victor in the AM class, and Pro-Am honours to Pla and Beaubelique. Jonathan Mitchell is going to be second in AM. Heiko Neumann here fourth, overall third in the class. And then the rest of the cars powering over the timing line with Christoph von Oeynhausen's BMW for fifth, and Phil Keane and Adam Ballon getting into the top six. Really good run, wasn't it, in the Gallardo. There's a Z4 blasts over, just beautiful sound that you would never ever get tired of listening to. And it's hard to actually pick your favourite sounding car, isn't it? Up bias, it's Z4. I just love the scream of the V12 out the Aston as well. And there is Phil Keane pushing to the line, claiming the final podium position in the Pro-Am class. Yeah, Jim Pla, Jean-Luc Beaubelique, the Pro-Am winners. Second, Christoph von Oeynhausen, as you say. For third, Phil Keane and Adam Ballon. Benjamin Ricci from Jonathan Mitchell, from Heiko Neumann, the top three in the AM category. So perhaps inevitably, over the course of the weekend, a few gremlins have affected cars, and it might be that we have one or two fewer for the second race. But I think that's been a pretty impressive debut. Some good racing, some good battles, and more importantly, some great cars. Yeah, and fair racing as well. Yeah. It's always hard, the balance in historic racing, and that's from a driver's perspective where I've raced very valuable cars. It's kind of trying to work out what the game is. Is it flat out and you fire someone off to win, or is it the owner wants it back in one good piece and you just have fun? And I think the balance seemed really good from everybody out there. So the cars on their in-lap. We only lost two. Jean Legras stationary on the circuit, and Jeff Visseringhausen having pitted. A car staying in the pit lane. Here is the Lindsay Brewer Ford GT then over the line to be 22nd. That's another car in the Pro-Am class, the experienced American racer, Lindsey Brewer, not experienced too much in European terms, but a lot of racing back in the States. So Jim Pla and Jean-Luc Beaubelic, the winners in the end by 1 second. I suspect that if Jim really wanted, he could have made that a bigger gap, but he did what was required. He got himself into the lead. He took the win for the car's owner, Jean-Luc Beaubelic, but made it a good race against Benjamin Ricci.
Yeah, again, that's a historic racing sort of tactic, is you get to the lead and then you manage it from there. There's no point winning by 10 seconds if you're putting so much energy through the car that potentially it's going to expire for no reason. So smart driving from Jim Pla.
And he took the fastest lap of the race, 2 minutes 4.446. The qualifying times 2 minutes 5. So Jim Pla doing a good effort, but of course the qualifying times set by, in some cases, different drivers. So cars ready to come down the pit lane, drivers then to the podium. Jim Pla, Jean-Luc Beaubelic, they've been a double act now for a decade plus, haven't they? And have had quite a lot of success together. The winning Ferrari making its way to this new Victor area. That's where the stop boards are. That has the benefit of being able to clear the pit lane as well, rather than having cars stationary when you're trying to get another huge field of GT cars, whether it's GT4 or Super Trofeo or yesterday GT3 teams out onto the circuit. So you get the winning cars out of the way, but still give them their victory area.
Could have made the parking a bit easier, couldn't they? It's quite a tight entrance there in these expensive cars. I don't know if they're going to get just the AM winners or the Pro-Am as well, but it's going to be a tight area there, but a very cool car park.
It is indeed. I think you're going to get the top 3 out of the 2 classes. You've certainly got the 2 class winners, and there Jim Pla out of the car.
Doesn't look like the budget was there to put Jim Pla's name on the car, does it? No. Just a white Sharpie, I think, that's been written on the roof. And long surname, short surname have had a good day.
Benjamin Ricci out of the family Ferrari. Handshakes all round. Pirelli tyres on which they run, as I say, and little discussion going on about what it was like out there. But well done, Jim Pla, good drive. And he doesn't look overly ruffled by that, does he? That was despite the fact he had to do quite a lot of pushing to close the gap. I don't think Jim had to drive quite as hard as he would have done in other races.
No, perfect way to start his Sunday morning, right?
Jean-Luc Beaubelic arriving on the scene to say bravo to Jim. And then the rest of the field making their way back to the GT3 Revival paddock. Bit of work to be done on some of the cars in anticipation of race 2 coming up later on in the day. For the fans trackside, still a busy day of racing with GT4 and Lamborghini, as well as the GT3 Revival Series. They're on track at 2:45. Let's hear from our winners then, with Bryn Lucas in the pit lane.
Well, gents, well done. It was a tough battle. You had to really work to take to the lead in that one there. When you started off the race, Jean-Luc, tell me your thoughts. What was it like getting out on the grid for the first time this year?
It's a veritable revival. We return with this car. I win in 2012 in Spa, and it's nice. And my teammate, it's very speed, and you make a big job.
Just very quickly, it was nice to get back in the car that you've raced before, but yourself, Jim, you had a tough job there. You were some 6-7 seconds behind. You managed to take the lead, and then there was no looking back.
No, the car was great. I enjoyed to come back and to catch my teammate Benjamin, who is doing really good job for an amateur. So yeah, that was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Was the victory always on the cards? Were you always thinking you could do it?
Honestly, yes.
Of course you were. Well done.
Thank you.
So a very happy team, and a great result for Jean-Luc Beaubelic and Jim Pla. That car, as you've been hearing, having had success at Spa in previous seasons. So it was 10th to win its class that year. Ludovic Badet, Patrice Guélard and Tristan Vautier joining Jean-Luc Beaubelic. So certainly a car with pedigree.
Yeah, that was a strong lineup, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Spa race. Not surprised it was, in all honesty. And yeah, cool to bring back those memories as well.
So drivers will make their way now to the podium. This is the result. Jean-Luc Beaubelic and Jim Pla, the winners from Benjamin Ricci and then Jonathan Mitchell. Heiko Neumann taking fourth from Christoph von Oeynhausen. Two cars that did drop away in the second stint, whereas Phil Keen hauled Adam Ballin's Lamborghini up to sixth. Philippe Goac was seventh ahead of Mark Cole and Alvaro Parent. Philippe Collinson was ninth, and then Will Nuttall brought Stefan Jöbstel's Ferrari into the top 10. And as we know, we lost Jean Legrat and Jeff Isringhausen. So for some of the teams, there's a bit of work to do, but looking forward to seeing the cars back out on track a little bit later on in the day. Right, your appetite whetted now to go around the Revival paddock with your business card and try and get yourself into a seat?
I just want to go and smell the cars. I want to see them again. And I was saying which was my favourite sounding. It's too article.
Let's look back at the first GT3 Revival Series race that began with Heiko Neumann making a big bid for the race lead down towards turn one. He was on the outside line, he had his nose in front, but it was the longer line, and that gave Benjamin Ricci the opportunity. He retook the lead as Jonathan Mitchell went third in the blue Aston Martin, and Christoph von Oeynhausen ran fourth. Jonathan Mitchell made an error at the chicane, slithered a little bit wide, and that gave Christoph von Oeynhausen a chance to challenge. And Mitchell did that 2 laps in a row as he started to understand what the Aston was capable of under braking. Some good battles a little bit further back. Jean-Luc Beaubelic, for example, on his toes, trying to get the Ferrari up through the field, having lost ground early on. And gradually the car came into the mix as we had a spin also coming from Audi number 3. That rotated itself going up into the right-hander of the Virage de la Tour. A spin for number 40, that was Celia Martin at the wheel. As into the pit lane came Stefan Jöbstel to give way to Will Nuttall. Jonathan Mitchell pounced on Heiko Neumann after the pit stops and brought the Aston Martin up into third place. But for the race lead, Benjamin Ricci was caught by Jim Pla, and Jim was able to find a way by putting the historic race car run Ferrari into a lead it would not lose. Jim also taking the fastest lap of the race as well after an impressive drive. So honours in our first GT3 Revival Series race for Jean-Luc Beaubelic and Jim Pla. Drivers now making their way towards the podium. And Jim Pla, as we were saying, not part of that Spa 24 podium result, but certainly getting on top of that car very effectively here. That's Benjamin Ricci, who is the winner of the AM class. And underlining the fact that those Ferraris were always very quick around Paul Ricard. The slippery shape always used to help the Ferraris go well around here. Can remember the likes of Kessel Racing always having good results here. In terms of speed, sometimes Kessel would go wrong in the pits, but the cars were always very, very quick indeed. So drivers, as we say, head to the podium. It's rather overcast Sunday morning at Paul Ricard, but still lots of people coming in for another busy day of racing. It was absolutely heaving yesterday for, if you like, the main day, the main focus on GT3 with the party in the evening, and SRO having said, OK, we can't really add cars to grids anymore, but what we can do is get more people through the gate and looking after the fans now.
I was actually quite angry how busy it was getting out of here.
It was almost impossible.
It took like 45 minutes to get out of the circuit. It was so many people. It stayed so late. And yeah, I think it was past 1 o'clock after I made a rally course around the circuit here trying to get past everyone. But yeah, phenomenal. And so much fan activation as well all the way around. There's so much to do, be it whatever age you are, there's someone and something to keep you entertained. So as the GT3 teams get the cars back to the paddock, we will have the circuit full of GT4 cars very shortly. Drivers now, as I say, making their way to the podium, but one of the downsides of historic racing is that it's full of jolly people who have conversations and talk about their race and are in no hurry to get to a podium, which doesn't help for timetables, but they'll get there. So GT3 continuing to impress, and with different drivers starting in some of the cars for race 2. It's going to be interesting. And when you bear in mind that Motor Racing Legends in the UK has its own series with a
pretty much completely standalone entry list. There will be some crossover, I think, as the year goes on. But you know, there are as many cars again out there racing, and more to come. So the field of GT3 Revival Series cars certainly impressing, and I think the more and more people that see them think, yeah, okay, I need one of those and go racing, and that's only going to help the value as well, because an old race car doesn't have much, but when it's eligible for a series and could win races within a historic series, then all of a sudden it's a far better investment. The circuit de Paul Ricard, of course, home of the French Grand Prix in recent years. Their drivers having the requisite patches applied to their overalls. The series looked after by SRO and Peter Auto, Patrick Peter's concern. Patrick Peter, one of the early GT series founders with Jürgen Barth and Stefan Rattel. He was the P of BPR, which were in the background a moment ago. Adam Ballon and Phil Keane waiting to get to the podium as well. So there you've got the fans looking down from the top of that big pit building onto the pit lane. Can you show some drivers or something, please? What's something to talk about? Jim Pla's career that began in single-seater racing with great success, but when the money ran out, GT racing became the desired route to go. Paul Ricard now, of course, closed for many years, purely a test track. Then it came back as a public race circuit. But you can see, didn't have them in the 70s, but all the red and blue paint, different retardation there. A high-speed test track it was for many, many years. Some drivers talk about almost feeling nauseous with all that swirly paint on a long stint, and it can be a bit bewildering at times. Yeah,
it really can. It's a bit hypnotic almost at times as well, especially it's a track that I've done a lot of laps around. You'd come here to do your validation test, so do a 30-hour stint to make sure the car was ready to be signed off. And God knows, I must have done 10, 15,000 laps around here. And yeah, you certainly get into a rhythm and hypnotic at times.
So Benjamin Ricci, AM winner, is with Bryn. He can reflect on second overall and a class win.
Well, it was so close. You had a 6-second lead or 7-second lead there with some 4 or 5 laps to go, and then all of a sudden it got smaller and smaller.
Yeah, well, Jim was behind, and I knew that Jim is very fast. So once he was in my back, I just let him go. So you know, clean racing, and then I tried to hang on to him, maybe have an opportunity at the end. But yeah, it was very fun. Those cars are amazing. My first GT race was in this car actually, so very happy to be back here.
And it all came back to you straight away. No sort of memories that you couldn't quite tap into.
No. It's like riding a bike.
Lovely. Well done, because you got the AM victory.
Thank you.
So Benjamin Ricci then, the man that started on pole, coming through as AM victor. And in the first stint of the second race, he will be up against Jim Pla once more, with the starting driver, of course, having done the qualifying time. So soloist Benjamin Ricci, but Jim Pla will be the start driver. So that battle continues. So there are the drivers in the background, Adam Ballon and Phil Keane, who, of course, partnered up in British GT for a number of seasons at Barwell. Adam Ballon in just going out of shot on the right. Benjamin Ricci with second place. Jean-Luc Boblique there winning Pro-Am with Jim Pla. Other drivers discussing their race. Heiko Neumann, the Mercedes driver, fell back a little bit in that second stint, but good to have Mercedes on the grid. Again, there were quite a few of those that ran through different teams, so I think that's another brand that you'll see more of as the season continues. And also plenty of Audis, but quite a few Chevrolets were in the early days. Also in that opening season of GT3 in Europe, there were the Ascaris, and also Chrysler Vipers on that early grid as well. It'd be nice to see one or two of those being tempted out. So the AM podium getting underway. Heiko Neumann is the first one to step forward for third place, having battled for the race lead early on. And Heiko Neumann then will receive his trophy. Then for second place, onto the podium comes Jonathan Mitchell. And the top step of that AM podium will go the way of Benjamin Ricci, who steps forward. Trophies presented by the Peter Auto side of the organisation. And Benjamin Ricci starting with second place in the race, but a class win. So Benjamin Ricci takes honours in the AM category, and race 2 for the GT3 Revival Series will be at just before 3 o'clock this afternoon.